Now, in the time frame as the Hundred Years' War is moving forward, and many areas in France are being devastated by the mercenaries and other armies traversing across the territory, besieging cities, consuming resources, and in many ways doing great infrastructure damage and lowering the population and economic activity of the area. The thing about warfare, and we all know this from the modern age, is it's extremely expensive. And what we want to take a look at here for a second is just to go back to England during the time period of the Hundred Years' War and note that there are some major developments for us that are very interesting, building on what Magna Carta had done, but also on the needs of war. Now remember, with the end of the Civil War essentially in 1215 and John signing the Magna Carta in England, he in many ways had come into more of a cooperative arrangement, shall we say, with many of the major churchmen who are advising him and many of the commoners who are wealthy and many of the nobles as well. So he has a combination of churchmen, titled noblemen, and big business people who one way or the other have great influence over lots of things within the British government. But John, of course, is the one who calls. Now, John dies in 1216, leaving behind a very young son who becomes the next king of England, who will in many ways be controlled by the adults around him. And now as as that system goes forward, okay, and we get towards the time of the Hundred Years' War, right, the English then have changed the royal family by 1399 after a series of issues and problems. But in the middle of that time frame of the war, they have started to take a look at what's necessary to successfully prosecute a war. And this is where we want to talk for a moment, all right? In this case, the English monarch is going to become extremely powerful in the sense of all this military obligation, tax collection necessity, strategic planning, diplomacy, all the different things that go into running and prosecuting a successful war, of course, goes to the monarch at first. But let's think of it this way. Nobody can run a war without money, without supporters, without attracting and keeping people involved. There's no reason for many people to continue in the war. So the English king is going to continue to have to do that, and in centralizing authority and power has to find a way, of course, to raise the revenue, right? These military expeditions are extremely expensive. There's a necessity for gathering more money. And in many ways, trying to find a way to finance the war is one of the key issues that's going to be interesting for English development, because many of the commoners and many of the nobles and churchmen have the money, have the cash, have the wealth that the king wishes to tap into somehow for the payment of mercenaries or the providing of equipment, paying of shipping, whatever is necessary. So in time, what's going to happen is the English monarchs are going to have to go back to their nobles, their churchmen, and their big business people in search of potential loans as well as taxation. That increasingly is going to come and lead to what is going to be slowly emerging, and that is the English Parliament. All right? This is the palace in modern-day Westminster, and you can see the modern people walking around it. But we wanted to show you the space, right? Here is the space in Westminster, right outside the city of London, right next to the Thames River, where the power and authority of the nation comes. The king is nearby, the House of Lords is emerging, the House of Commons, the common people is emerging. Now, the development of Parliament is by itself its own kind of long-term debate or lecture series, shall we say. But let's settle for this. As the kings of England necessarily need more revenue to prosecute their wars overseas, they need money, and the people who have money are willing to bargain with the king over various forms of taxation, over the rates at which they're charged, when they will be paid, how they're collected. In other words, there's a series of bargainings that are going to be going back and forth. There's some deal-making going on between the monarch and his servants and the people with the money. It sounds like a strange way to think of it, but that's going to be one of the aspects that will be important in looking at the creation of Parliament in England. This is going to be that nexus, that junction between those with the money, those with the power, and the king and his servants who want it and need it for the prosecution of the dynastic war in France. Take a closer look at the reading. Also, take a look and see if there's any sample questions that can help you pull some of these ideas together in the context of this happening before, during, and after the 100 Years' War.